On July 2, 2021, up to 1,500 businesses across 17 countries went offline at once, not because of a physical disaster, because a single ransomware attack exploited a vulnerability in Kaseya VSA, remote management software used by managed service providers. The attacker was REvil. The ransom demand was $70 million. The FBI had already obtained the decryption key by then and declined to share it for 3 weeks while they pursued the attackers. JBS Foods, the world's largest meat processing company, paid $11 million in ransom to REvil 6 weeks before the Kaseya attack. Apple's component supplier Quanta paid $50 million. REvil was not subtle. They were not hiding. REvil, ransomware, evil, also known as Sodinokibi, emerged in 2019 following the apparent dissolution of GandCrab, another prominent ransomware operation. Security researchers believe REvil was either a continuation of GandCrab under new branding or a close offshoot. GandCrab had declared $2 billion in extorted proceeds before announcing retirement. REvil launched the ransomware as a service model at scale, developer core team providing the malware and infrastructure, with affiliates conducting attacks and splitting proceeds, typically 80-20 in favor of affiliates. They advertised on Russian-language dark web forums, ran a public leak site called Happy Blog, and communicated with journalists. They operated like a business. The Sodinokibi code contained a hard-coded check. If the malware detected that the infected system's language settings were Russian, Ukrainian, Romanian, or several other Soviet bloc languages, it would terminate without executing. This is standard practice for Russian cybercriminal operations, a mutual understanding with Russian intelligence that operations don't target domestic entities in exchange for tolerance of international criminal activity. REvil operated openly in Russia. Their leadership was known to the Russian security services. They spoke openly in interviews with journalists. The Kremlin's implicit protection was the business model's foundation. The Colonial Pipeline attack in May 2021 changed the political calculus. Attributed to DarkSide, a separate but similar operation, the attack shut down 45% of the U.S. East Coast fuel supply for 6 days. Gas lines formed. Prices spiked. The Biden administration declared a national emergency. President Biden confronted Putin directly about harboring ransomware criminals at the Geneva summit in June 2021. The message was explicit: if Russia didn't act, the United States would. 2 weeks later, REvil's dark web infrastructure disappeared. REvil took their leak site and payment portal offline suddenly, without explanation. The shutdown was likely encouraged. REvil returned 2 months later, in September 2021, apparently believing the pressure had passed. Their infrastructure came back online. New victims appeared on their leak site. Then, in October 2021, something unusual happened. A security researcher working with the FBI identified a vulnerability in REvil's infrastructure and turned it against the group. The group's own Tor-based infrastructure was compromised. REvil's leadership went quiet. On January 14, 2022, the FSB, Russia's domestic intelligence service, announced that it had arrested 14 REvil members in a coordinated operation across 4 Russian cities. Russian authorities seized cryptocurrency, cash, computers, and luxury goods. It was described as cooperation with U.S. law enforcement. The timing of the arrests was not coincidental. Russia's invasion of Ukraine began on February 24, 2022, 40 days after the REvil arrests were announced. The arrests were interpreted by analysts as a goodwill gesture offered during the pre-invasion diplomatic period, when Russia was attempting to reduce confrontation with Western governments. The United States had been threatening significant consequences for continued ransomware activity. The FSB's announcement emphasized cooperation with the United States, an unusual framing for an agency that typically avoids acknowledging collaboration with American intelligence. The arrests were real. What happened next was also real. By May 2022, within months of the invasion of Ukraine beginning and the subsequent collapse of U.S.-Russia diplomatic relations, the cases against the arrested REvil members were quietly dropped. Russian courts released them. The charges disappeared. Within 6 months of their arrests, former REvil affiliates were detected participating in new ransomware operations under different names. The entire exercise, the arrests, the show of cooperation, the public announcements, had been a diplomatic performance. When the diplomatic incentive evaporated, so did the prosecutions. This is the consistent pattern of Russian cybercriminal prosecution. Arrests happen when geopolitically convenient. Charges dissolve when the incentive passes. The most significant REvil adjacent prosecution actually happened in the United States. Yaroslav Vasynsky, a Ukrainian national who deployed the Kaseya attack, was arrested in Poland in October 2021 and extradited to the United States. He pleaded guilty in March 2023 and was sentenced to 13 years and 7 months in federal prison. Yevgeny Polyanin, a Russian national, was also charged, and over $6 million in his assets were seized. These prosecutions required the attacker to travel to a jurisdiction that would extradite. Russian nationals who remain in Russia are effectively immune from Western prosecution, absent a change in the Russian government's protection of cybercriminals. The Kaseya attack specifically exploited a vulnerability in Kaseya VSA, software used by managed service providers to remotely manage their clients' IT environments. One compromised MSP could deploy ransomware to all of its clients simultaneously. REvil exploited CVE 2021 30116, a zero-day in Kaseya VSA, to push a malicious update to MSP clients without requiring credentials. Up to 1,500 downstream businesses were encrypted through approximately 60 managed service providers. The attack demonstrated that supply chain targeting through IT management software, rather than business software, dramatically multiplied scale. The Kaseya attack was the ransomware equivalent of SolarWinds. REvil extracted over $1 billion from victims across 20 countries, attacked hospitals, critical infrastructure, and the supply chains of major corporations, announced their retirements, came back, got arrested, got released, and reformed under new names. The criminal group that extorted more money than any other in the history of ransomware is still operating. That outcome is the product of a deliberate state policy. Russia maintains cybercriminal capability as a foreign policy instrument, deploying goodwill gestures like arrests when diplomatically advantageous, withdrawing them when the incentive disappears. If you want to understand the broader ransomware ecosystem that REvil operated within, the gangs, the infrastructure, and how payments flow, our video on Ransomware 101 covers the industrial architecture. REvil is one gang in a much larger machine. If you want to see the architecture they operated inside, how access is bought, how payments flow, and what actually decides whether a victim survives, our video on Ransomware 101 covers the full industrial pipeline. It is on this channel.